Good morning to everybody. I see people are still trickling in. We got a great crowd, so really appreciate it. We have an all-star panel here with Reg and Amber and John. As Sylvia mentioned, the topic here I think is a very timely one, because one of the reasons we decided to sponsor today and that we were excited to have this all-star panel is that it's soon to be rate card season. So your law firms are about to do what they just view as I like to joke, when Moses came down from the Temple Mount, the 11th commandment, which has gotten less press, is that lawyers always get a raise. And so, this is just the way of the world. That it doesn't necessarily need to be that way, and in a proper functioning market, that's not the way things work. But obviously, in our profession and in our industry, that has been the way it has worked. So a little bit, I'm going to let John, Amber, and Reg introduce themselves, and they'll do it succinctly so that we can get into the great comments on the panel. Just a quick overview of who I am and what Bodhala is. So I'm Raj Goyle. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Bodhala, as Sylvia mentioned. We are the leading company that gives you analytics around your outside counsel spend. We're not an e-billing tool. We're not matter management. We are what a venture capitalist would call a category creator. We're thrilled to be in a really hyper growth mode. We're tripled revenue in the last year. And actually just last month, we announced that we were actually purchased by Onit, O-N-I-T, which is owned by K1. So we had a good change of control there. We're still an independent subsidiary. We still run the business and no real change for any of our clients or prospects. In fact, just more resources for us to invest in our groundbreaking AI technology. But at the end of the day, what Bodhala gives is we have reverse engineered the billing model of your law firms. And the result of that is that we're able to give you actual grounded benchmarks and market intelligence, actionable intelligence around what you can do to optimize that outside counsel spend. Importantly, and this is a good segue into the panel, which is every department is different. And what we've learned in our Bodhala journey, now working with some of the largest entities on earth, massive. I mean, we have a client with $2 billion in outside counsel spend. We have clients with $4 million in outside counsel spend. So the beauty of software, of course, is that you can flex up and down depending on the use case. And so one thing we've learned to be very, sort of candid in our journey from sort of a cocktail napkin of an idea 10 years ago to now a very powerful piece of software and services, is that everybody's on a different change management journey. And so what is a pain point for Amber and what is something she needs to do may be different than what Reg is facing. And for all of you attending, that's different. The common, if you'll permit this analogy, I'm the son of two doctors. And so, one thing we always say is that every human body is different, but we still study biology. And so there are hugely important trends in pattern analysis. If you engage in really destructive behaviors to the human body, it doesn't matter who you are, it's not going to go well for the human body. But that being said, my nutrition and fitness plan will be very different than yours because of who we are. And so similarly, Bodhala gives you that biological analysis. We understand what's happening in that outside counsel spend and lift up data. And then culturally speaking, change management wise, you need to go on that journey for yourself and for your corporate legal department. We've got about $20 billion of spend data in our platform. We run our algorithms across that, and we work with departments large and small, as I mentioned. So without further ado, love to if we could just go in the order of Reg, Amber, John, just 30 seconds on who you are, and then we'll kick off with the question. So Reg.
Sounds good. Thank you. Everybody can hear me?
Yeah, you sound great.
Hello, my name is Reggie Plac. I'm a senior sourcing consultant at American Family Insurance. Organizationally, part of the sourcing and procurement department that reports up through the finance division. I've been supporting the legal division for about the last 6 years. I've been in the sourcing field for over 20 years. The hair kind of gives some of that away. All of it's been in the financial industry. Predominantly, background was with large Chicago, New York based banks.
Terrific. Amber?
Hi, I'm Amber Sasso. I am a senior category manager with Novo Nordisk. We are a pharmaceutical firm based out of New Jersey. headquartered in Denmark, Copenhagen. I am part of our US affiliate procurement and business service team. We also report up to finance. I have primary responsibilities for setting the buying strategies for legal as well as management consulting, which tend to have some overlap in the way we approach them, especially around timekeeper rates, et cetera. I've got about 12 plus years in procurement, always within indirect professional services space. And prior to coming to Novo Nordisk, I was part of Bristol Myers Squibb, where I also had an opportunity to manage their legal operations team for about a 2-year period of time. So looking forward to the discussion.
All right, I'm John Smith. I lead legal procurement or legal sourcing at MetLife. I've been doing this about 6 years, like the other panelist. I sit in procurement and report up to the finance group. And really on a day-to-day, I manage outside counsel, all legal sourcing, all legal vendors, and really kind of partner with legal operations to manage the billing system as well. Prior to MetLife, I was a litigation attorney for 7 years until I wanted a higher quality of life, and I got back out of that. So,
that's such an interesting little Easter egg there, John. You got to give us 30 seconds more on that, because as Amber and Reg mentioned, I'm sure for a lot of, in fact, I know a lot of the attendees, being in the industry for so many years. I'm looking at the attendee list. I know there is a good mix of people in procurement and business experts, with some people with law degrees, probably the vast majority without. John, that was too interesting. Give us 30 seconds on why it was more interesting to do what you're doing now, quality of life, than being a lawyer.
Well, I just recall when I was the day before my last interview with MetLife, I had pulled an all-nighter for closing arguments of a FELA trial, railroad litigation, where we got a very nice verdict, but I realized that I just can't be doing all-nighters at this age anymore. So litigation was one of those things that just it constantly followed you home, right? It was always lurking over your shoulder that that you could be doing more. So as someone who I just needed a change. So this enabled me to use my background, but in the business side of things.
Awesome. Well, thank you for opening up there a little bit. That was interesting. And given the age of COVID and all the questions we're having, I suspect that's a larger topic and probably best served over some drinks as well. So in any case, we'll jump into the substantive topic. One thing I wanted to just sort of preface with, and when we did our prep call, we, and this is what the slide shows, really around quote discounts. Sylvia mentioned at her outset, Amber mentioned as well, given her great background, which is if you stop and think about it, just to kind of set the stage, this is both factual, but a little bit also, maybe provocative of sorts, just to get the conversation going, which is, I made my snarky comment about Moses's 11th commandment there, that lawyers get a raise. But if you stop and take the bigger picture for a second about our industry and about our profession, it's a very, very strange industry in which, in a normal functioning market, there's a buy side and a sell side. And so, for your three entities, I mean, look at these companies: American Family Insurance, Novo Nordisk, and MetLife, massive global corporations. I mean, thousands and thousands of, headcount, tens of thousands, of course, of all three, hundreds. There's probably not another spend category that functions like legal in the following way, and obviously would love comment on this, in which, in a normal, efficient market, the buy side has the leverage, and the buy side is the price maker, not the price taker. So the buy side of the house says, I have competition and I benefit from that. I get price discovery. I get the benefit of data. I get the benefit of innovation. And you, the sell side vendor, have to be held accountable to my standards because I'm the client. And the way that I give the example is a really easy one is hamburgers and consumers. If someone tries, if McDonald's franchise tries to charge me $40 for a Big Mac, the trade doesn't clear because there's such a robust competition for that good. I know that that price is out of market. I know that there's many kinds of burgers I can get. I can go get a $50 burger at a very fancy restaurant. I can get, McDonald's. I can get Five Guys. There's all, that's a very, very robust, mature market. So one thing I'd love to, and maybe we'll kick off with Amber and then go to John and then Reg, and then we can obviously keep it relaxed and free form, which is, in the legal market, even before we get to the pricing, although pricing is endemic to it, how do you think about the market and these discounts? Because as we know, when the law firms are the price makers, and the thing that's super weird is that there is an endless supply of lawyers. So the only time that the buy side is a price taker is when it's a monopoly. For example, because nobody on the panel here from Verizon, I can't get cheaper internet service because it's an oligopoly. I have to pay the $80 a month for that internet service, even when it doesn't work sometimes. That's a different topic. But in the law, there's literally a million lawyers. There's 40,000 lawyers that graduate every year. There, even for the most sophisticated legal matters, there's lots of options. How do you all square that reality of this market where it's almost inverse, and then what it manifests itself is in these quote discounts? Because right now you can't even tell what the market rate is. You have to trust the vendor to say that the discount is good. So I threw a lot out there. Amber first, Amber, Red, John. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So one approach that we take that has been pretty successful for us is we've established a preferred law firm program where we're basing it off of capabilities, experience, outcomes, really starting with the capabilities and the experience first within various practice areas. So we look at litigation, we look at employment, we look at government investigations, and kind of chunk it that way. But then within our panel of what we call preferred law firms are where we focus, and then based off of their capabilities, their success, their performance, and we're having these annual reviews with them year over year to test their performance. That's kind of how we put them together. And then within that cluster, we're looking at how their rates across those 8 or 10 firms compare with that grouping and the discounts that they're offering to Novo and the volume discounts that come into play. So I think that's where we start, is we kind of make our own industry benchmark or insight based on the program or parameters that our inside case handlers or attorneys are looking for. And it really starts with their expertise, is the best way I could describe it.
Yeah, it's super helpful, Amber. And Reg, and I see both of you nodding your head. So please.
Sure. I would echo everything that Amber said. We kind of do the same thing. We established, being an insurance company, there's a couple different types of litigation, if you will, that we're involved in. One is relating to our policyholders. Another one is kind of defending the company and class actions and stuff like this. So we have pre-established panels on the policyholder defense side. It's well over 100 law firms that we establish. So we do contract with them. So there's, as Amber says, they are the preferred firms. We have over time kind of developed a flat fee methodology, a phased fee methodology, and then added the hourly rate card. What the push is to get more firms to do the flat fee and the phase tier pricing as opposed to hourly. But those rates are all pre-negotiated, so that if we get a bodily injury case and it's in Missouri and it's in a certain county, we know what the firms that bid in that particular area, what their pricing was. The firms that participate are, it's kind of a decision through our attorneys who kind of know the market, know the attorneys, know the law firms, how they performed, et cetera. And on the corporate litigation side, we will also we set up the panel. We have rate cards established, and what we try and do is to bid out cases when feasible. It isn't always feasible, but when it does, you get the benefit of kind of the market. So from our viewpoint, without necessarily using sophisticated data, which I will indicate that we're not very good at that yet. We're using the firm's pricing against each other to identify the market, and then there's some sense of kind of what historical spend has been.
We're doing the exact same thing.
Yep. Yeah. To add to that, like Amber and Reggie, MetLife, we have a panel. The panel's roughly 100 law firms, but then we have what we call our preferred panel, where we really focus and compare. But even though we do have a preferred panel of only 8 firms, we still also utilize competitive bidding as well. Without competitive bidding, you can get the firms can get complacent. You don't necessarily all 8 firms aren't peers in every practice group. So to really make sure you're getting the benefit of, say, in the employment space, put out the bid with another non-panel employment firm. I will add that there is another challenge, though, where, with MetLife, we do have our regular caseload. We're reasonably predictable year to year. That makes it very easy in terms of using data. You can look at past cases, compare. But when a kind of novel or unique matter arises, then it really does become critical to use competitive bidding there. You don't know, you can't look at past data to see, what you can reasonably expect in terms of hours worked, past rates. So in the absence of that past data, your best tool is the competitive bidding process. And then one other note there, even if you go out to bid and you negotiate hard and you get a very good discount, you could either even get an AFA. Really, you're talking about one part of a matter's life cycle. And it's really important to develop rules and manage a matter from the competitive tender process all the way through the legal operations function of approving rates in your e-billing system, making sure the discounts are applied to the matter, down to the attorney or the matter manager. MetLife, we have our MetLife attorney matter manager actually review the invoices and making sure that you're getting billed for proper items. So it's critical to really get the discount you supposedly negotiate for. It's important to manage the matter all the way through its life cycle.
Terrific. And I have to say, this was not a setup by any means, but Bodhala does happen to have an automated tool to run that competitive process. So we, for those of you who are interested, because obviously a common thread of what the 3 of you said was around, if I were to back up and sort of play economist in my moderator role, is what you guys basically said, if I could sum up, is the market's too immature to actually give us hard market data, right? There's no Amazon.com to log into to say blah, blah, blah. And again, Bodhala is on that journey. We can talk later about that. So in the absence of that, we do the best we can, and we do competition, because by getting competition, you obviously set a benchmark and an internal dynamic within that competitive cohort. And that is probably good enough for where we are, obviously, as an industry. So if that's a fair summary, that's sort of what I heard. And I think that's right. Amber, go ahead. You're about to say something.
Yeah, I was just going to say to further add to that and the power that you get from that, by setting up that cohort or that panel, these firms being competitive the way they are, there's some prestige and there's some benefit that they get too by being one of those top 8 to 10, and for them to maintain their spot on that panel by performing those competitive pricing models for the matters that are coming up and staying competitive with their volume discounts and their hourly rates and working with us through AFAs. There's no opportunity to get complacent because they run the risk of being bumped off of that preferred list as we go through our annual performance with them. So that's another way that we're able to drive some competitiveness between our firms within the market. We can leverage them one against the other. And then another tip and trick that we've used too to help give us some of that pricing visibility, going beyond the hourly rate, we've developed a template, which we call a statement of work template, but it's basically a pricing breakout where, John mentioned the life of matter visibility. They're not only being asked to provide their timekeeper hourly rates, but then give us the fees by phase, by task, across what they're assuming is the life of that particular matter that's in question, so that we can start to see how they're building out the resources that they're going to need at the phases that they're going to approach, what's in scope for those, so we can get some of that detail, that pricing, and unbundle some of that bulk or that fixed fee price, if you may. But that's helpful for us too.
There's been, and actually, Sylvia, if you're still there, I'm a little, I'm a little confused on the chat function. So can everybody, all 57 attendees and 5 panelists, can see all of this, or I can't tell?
No, people can, you can see it as the panelists, but they can see some of the questions, so.
Okay. Well, some of them say just the host and panelists. So here's what I'm going to do. We have some great conversation going here. Some people I know.
You can ask. You can take the questions anytime, and I'm happy to unmute the attendees. So you just.
Okay. Well, how about this? I'm going to throw the questions out here, which are some good ones, and then obviously, if somebody would like to just speak, obviously, just let Sylvia know. We're happy to have a short question. But one of the things is that Tony Clapper from Volkswagen asked sort of, are there publicly available anonymized data for price or free that identifies market rates? I did say, for what it's worth, we actually do that. I don't want to, we can talk later offline about that. But Tony, if you have any more color you'd like to add onto that question, feel free. Tony, you able to hear us? Oh, maybe some audio trouble there. While we wait for Tony to connect, my friend Rich from Canada, put in the, and I think everybody read that market rates are sort of an optical illusion. So anything you want, and obviously that's consistent with Raj and Bodhala theory that I've talked about. But Rich, do you want to hum a few more bars on that one?
I clicked on talking per minute. I don't know if you gentlemen are having trouble with your audio, but you are talking per minute. Richard, I think it's working now. Is it? Hello, Richard.
Audio not working. Here's what we'll do. We don't want to. Zoom is an amazing company, but sometimes a little bit hard to use. I saw in the Wall Street Journal today that they're having some trouble buying a Chinese company. So in any case, Adam may ask a direct question, which is there actual evidence on the statement about volume discounts? That's a rather sweeping statement. Adam, are we able to hear you?
Doesn't seem to want to work today. I clicked on ask to unmute and talking permitted, but
all right. Well, I think if the audio kicks in, that's great. But I think I can take it from here for our panel, which is, Oh, is that you, Tony?
It is. I hit settings.
Terrific.
Yeah. No,
Go ahead, Tony.
yeah. No, I was just I did ask that question, and thank you. It's good to hear that, Raj, you've got access to. I put in quotes market rates because that is, as another commentator mentioned, that is definitely a term that, having been an outside counsel, something that we advertise and say, here's our market rate. Oh, but here's our budget rate. Here's our discount rate. And I always felt that that was a bit of a ploy. But understanding a true market rate, or what the average rate is within the industry in a particular jurisdiction for a particular type of expertise or service. My understanding, and I had some visibility into this, but I don't know the secret sauce. Like, marketing departments at various law firms, I think, have access to this stuff. Like is this stuff available in a Lexis Westlaw?
No.
Do I have to pay for it and go to Bodhala and say, hey, want to work with you guys and would love to work with you guys, but that's my only avenue for getting this type of information. So that's my question for the larger group, or for anyone who could, share any thoughts on any tricks of the trade and gaining access to that. So
Sure.
that's my question.
Thanks, Tony. And I'll go first and then let the panel respond with their own perspective. Let me just speak from, obviously, somebody who spends millions of dollars in the data in this field and obviously knows every competitive product and so on. The 10 seconds on the history of, frankly, benchmarking is that there is a city survey that the pricing specialists from law firms use. City, of course, banks the AmLaw 200, and it's a survey. So it's really kind of tautological, which is law firms say, oh, this is what we're charging. And so the survey comes back and says, oh, so I'm within market. So law firm pricing people, and they of course have their own group called P3. They sort of are a self-referential group. And they say, what are you charging? What are you charging? It is categorically not what we have all talked about and what sourcing people would understand, which is an independent third-party view to say, what is the market price for this good? The other, quote, benchmark tools out there are really not able, and again, this is, I don't mean to sing our book, but unless you have algorithms that cleanse the data, just to be very blunt, the data from law firms is way too dirty to just run it in comparison. A law firm does a write-off differently than a discount is. So getting back to the healthcare analogy, when you do a heart cath in Phoenix, when you bill it to the government, it's billed in the exact same structure as it is when you do it in New York City. But as we know in the law, there are no such standards. So the data, what we've spent millions of dollars doing is having our data cleanse, our system cleanse that data so you can make apples to apples comparisons. The problem with benchmarking in the industry to date has been that it is not apples to apples. And so, and that's the cold reality, which is why, we've got this amazing panel saying, hey, this is why we're doing the tactics that we've got. So please, Amber, I saw you want to jump in on that?
No, you're absolutely right. And data has always been the biggest pain point and struggle, even with the billing and the matter management systems and SAP and the contracting systems that we have within procurement. We find ourselves doing a lot of manual spreadsheets and our own side-by-side assessments and comparisons. And so when you hear me talking about pulling our panel rates together and what they're actually pitching us as proposed rates, and then taking a blended average and really pushing them against the ones that are apples to apples, litigation or in employment law or in environmental law, to make sure that they're comparable, or patents, trademarks, etc. I find that if we use the data that we're getting from the suppliers that we're considering and looking at, that's more real, more realistic to use for negotiations. But we do tap into intelligence through companies like Time Metrics, who publishes the Real Rate report. I've used that report myself for a number of years, not so much as the end all be all benchmark, but at least it gives me some general insights to see how close my internal benchmarks are comparing to an e-billing data set like that. but that again is not free, and it's something that you have to purchase. So it's kind of a combination of using external benchmarks like that as a test in the wind sort of approach, and then what you're truly seeing with your own numbers within your e-billing system.
Amber, thank you, Amber, and obviously Tony, I'd love to chat and we can talk more detail about the real rate report and other things. Adam, how's your audio doing?
Sorry, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Awesome. And thank you, Tony, for your question before. Adam, you asked a great question again. I think everybody saw it, but just to reiterate, you said volume discounts, are they real?
Well, it's not so much that are they real. I think from the law firm side, we don't develop volume-based discounts that we're guaranteed a number of work. It's if we reach these thresholds, then discount is X. So I don't necessarily, and I don't know what the data is saying is they become inefficient, but I don't, when we do volume discounts, it isn't guaranteed work. Particularly like currently in the Canadian law market, our firms are at capacity. We don't, there's no shortage of work, and I don't know what exactly that's happened in the US market, but that's sort of why we're looking at building the volume discounts out. So I'm just curious in terms of how the contrast might be in the US market, of how the volume discounts might be structured.
Yep, please open on the panel.
So we have volume discounts with our 8 primary panel firms. And I don't think the issue is the volume discount itself, but rather the in-house attorneys blindly giving matters to these law firms without competitively bidding it out. So essentially, it's always surprising to me. Don't assume your attorneys understand the rate structures of given firms. And so, and when there's a volume discount in place, the incentive is obviously the in-house attorneys. They want to save MetLife money, so they'll just give a matter to one of these preferred firms, knowing that they get volume discounts down the line. But if they're doing it blindly and giving it to, a matter that could go to a cheaper firm or a non-panel firm, you're costing MetLife money, even though you're pushing volume to your preferred firms.
And just to build upon that, we're taking the same approach that John has described, blending over the top of that to help guide the attorneys. You've got your legal operations team partnering with procurement to help set a buying strategy or a long-term plan with your top law firm. So general rule like the 80-20, right? If you're channeling 80% of your spend towards your prefers, and then you're looking out long-term where your top spend matters are and who you can strategically, comfortably put, which firms you can put into those as the primary law firms supporting those matters. That's when I see, at least from the procurement side, that an opportunity to push for those deeper volume discounts can come into play. It kind of knowing where the attorneys are seeing the firms lining up to support, and if there are significant volumes that we know potentially could come out of those long-term matters, and really challenging them to give deeper volume discounts. Otherwise, to your point, when they get there, they're not really there. But that's where that buying strategy or partnership, and then you start getting into like the supplier relationship management end of things. Like, are you going to be very strategic with a top 2 or 3? And how can you leverage that discount at that point?
Yeah, if I could, I think one great comment, I'll just say from our lived experience with the way clients use data and corporate legal departments do, which is, I think in the absence of hard data, John mentioned sort of like the line attorneys, and they'll say, hey, we want to save MetLife money. In our lived experience, just to be clear, we haven't quite seen that. I don't think line attorneys wake up every day thinking about cost optimization. They think about trying to get to bed, as John mentioned, and just get through their day and not screw up and put out fires. Actually, I don't think, that's not, if they can, it's fine, but that's not their job. And in law school, as a lawyer myself, nobody teaches you anything about the business of law. So it's really not something that, a line attorney knows. And what we have found with data, and this has been a breakthrough for us, which is it's about the allocation. So I'll give you the best example, 10 seconds, which is one of the largest private equity firms in the world had huge spends, like 9-figure spends with 2 law firms, and then a whole bunch of spend with a bunch of other law firms. They thought on the surface, having run a little bit of competition, everything, that firm A was the better deal. They had amazing relationships with their line attorneys with both. Once they actually uncovered the data, really got apples to apples, it turned out firm B was actually the better value. It didn't change the politics. Let's be blunt, there's politics and everything. And the enterprise was able to just shift more work. And they saved money in the law, and they saved a lot of money, but they also didn't have any disruption. The relationship, the change management was easy once the data was there. I have a feeling, and I'll say that a lot of your departments, you have those opportunities, but without the data, you can't really action that. And that's really where we're seeing the trend going, is respecting relationships, but using data to shift allocation. Reg, do you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I was just going to kind of add, and maybe a bit of an outlier. We don't really use or look for volume discounts. We don't like to necessarily disclose volumes. A number of years ago, sometimes you're a product of your experiences. A number of years ago, volumes were disclosed. Going further, into the contract years, the volumes didn't necessarily materialize, caused issues, and so we've kind of shied away from that. I saw before there was a question about are we negotiating with firms at the panel level or at the matter level? We're doing both. When we establish panels, we establish a contract. Generally, it's for 3 years, and we're negotiating rates at that point in time. And we are using the other firms. So if we're doing a bid in Nevada, and there's 10 or 12 firms that we've invited to this thing, we are using those competitive bids against each other, along with some information that we have from kind of historical usage. Although, as I said before, that information is weak on our end. So we're doing it at that end. And then we're also doing it on a matter by matter basis, but that's generally on these larger matters. So for example, a class action, lots of times what's dependent upon is how soon responses need to be done in court. Therefore, how soon do you have an attorney in place? How quickly can you do a kind of an RFP? But it's not kind of the traditional RFP, because people think of RFPs as taking 2-3 months to accomplish. Well, these have to be done in about 10 days. To be able to get this thing set up. And so we've been able to set up a process to do that. But you have to have the willingness of your legal department to do that. And so that kind of requires building that relationship and trust in kind of the process. So I just kind of wanted to add that.
Awesome. If I could, we're having a great time in the chat here. So Kevin, are you logged? Are you able to chat?
You hear me?
Awesome. I think we have 2 Kevins, right? So I was like, yeah, Kevin Walsh, are you there?
Yep, that's me.
Awesome. Do you want to? We're just with an eye on the clock. Maybe just keep it short and sweet, and then we'll get to the other Kevin as well.
When we talk about hourly rates and we demonize them, most AFAs, volume discounts, fixed fees, cap fees, stage fees, whatever you want to call them, are typically based on the hourly rate. It's just a commodity. It's like buying gas or electricity. Everything has to have a unit price. The problem isn't so much in the use of a unit price, but rather how that unit price is arrived at. We have to be conscious that law firms are they're seeking growth every year. So either they put their prices up, or if they hold their prices, they'll do more hours, and they might try and pad it out a tad. So realistically, until we can understand how a law firm arrives at its hourly rate, we're basically still almost horse trading in the dark, really, because kind of
Well-
bidding against ourselves.
Well, I think we know how they do that.
Yeah, I mean, admittedly, they'll obviously price their in, as in the
Well-
overhead. What I'm talking about is their margin. Until we know what
No,
margin
well-
they're trying to make.
Well, just to speak about margin for a second, of course, in the law, they call it the realization rate. Lawyers always have to make something tricky. And so if you think about what happens, and obviously this is what we do, which is they come and they say there's a denominator and a numerator. And every year they say the denominator must increase.
Mhm.
So basically what they do is it's like they have a gravitational pull, which says denominator must increase. Therefore, numerator must increase. So we have to make a certain margin. And what's amazing about our industry is that law firms, the vendor says to client, I need a certain realization rate. There was an earlier comment about, oh, they're busy. And so in no other industry, like the McDonald's example, I don't know if that franchise operator makes 4 cents on the Big Mac or 18 cents. It's probably depending on how efficient he is operating it.
Mhm.
But Kevin, that is how law firms price, which is they want to raise the denominator as much as they can to see how much stretch they get to the numerator. And that's their realization rate. And
No,
they
I
do
completely
that
agree.
by practice area.
Completely agree about the realization rate. Of course, there's sometimes a bit of disconnect between how they front end put their price and the realization rate, because the realization rate is less guaranteed than the price they seek at the outset. You see what I mean by that? So yeah, so the only point I was trying to make is that increased transparency and collaboration with your law firm on the front end hourly rate can perhaps lead to more informed discussions about how we price an AFA. Because otherwise, if we're just working off the hourly rates and they're promising discounts, and this is a discount for this is a discount for that, it's hard to actually see the truth behind it, even when you try and benchmark against prior years, because like you said, the realization rate for them changes from one year to the other, as does their pricing, as does the number of hours they intend to do within a fixed price. That was the only point I was trying to make.
Terrific. If I could, Kevin Belowski had a nice comment in which I think P3 is officially disbanded and now reincarnated as the Legal Value Network. So thanks for the amendment there. And they have something called a Council of Luminaries, which I believe is the self-appointed brilliant people in pricing who you can check them out online. Kevin Belowski, did you have anything else you wanted to say about that?
I was just going to mention some of the other resources law firms use. Citibank, I'm not sure is used as readily, but the PwC BRASS survey, BRASS is an acronym for Billing Rate and Associate Salary report, that's highly used. And also Thomson Reuters Peer Monitor is highly used. And what I comment about those two is that the law firms actually pay to opt in on those on an annual basis, and in part of that agreement give access to those parties to their accounting system, Peer Monitor on a monthly basis, and BRASS is
and Kevin, you run law firm pricing for a law firm, correct?
Correct. So happy to provide any context around that. Realization is really a dying metric, I believe, in the law firm world. Profitability is the big driver, and we think about rate or price as just a tool to help allocate people's time. And so if someone is in very high demand, I mean, this is with any product or service, if it's high demand, you can control that demand by moving the price higher until people start to go elsewhere, or if they're just willing to pay it. They're, if I've got a highly, niche expertise that everyone wants, then we can ratchet that price up to a point that the market supports it, and we can control how much time and effort that particular attorney is spending.
Yeah. Hey, and Kevin, could I ask, when you keep using the word the market, when you say you have to market, you're just talking about the clients that your law firm works with and prospects with, correct?
Right. And the market can be It can be our existing client base or even new clients who are seeking certain expertise or services. So
super helpful perspective. I think one thing that's interesting is the market, and the way that our industry works is we have actually a bunch of thousands of sub-markets as opposed to a general market. Again, getting back to the hamburger example. So Kevin's points are super well taken, well articulated, but obviously limited to the people you're talking to. And if you can get that price, you get that price. What's interesting is about a world that potentially exists where we actually can contextualize all of it. And I think that's, love to know from the Red, John, and Amber, if you agree with that distinction or see that as a possibility. Showstopper question there, right? I probably didn't articulate very clearly, but I think if you pick one theme here from what the three of you have said and what even Kevin just said with a great contribution, which is everybody's dealing in their own little market, right? So Amber says, hey, I run competition within my world and I do the best I can within it. Kevin Belowski says, well, I go out to my clients and prospects and I price and I see what I can get on these people. And if the market's there, it's not. Obviously, the interesting thing is when you can knit all these together to create an actual market for legal services writ large. Yeah, so go ahead, Amber.
I was just thinking through the question and have I seen opportunity, and maybe the closest one I can think of, and correct me if I'm wrong or if I'm way off on this, but an instance that has come up in the past is where we kind of commoditized the employment law space, where we noticed we were trending significant amount of spend through one particular law firm. We were starting to use them more and more and more. And where employment law and like immigration, right, where the two are coming together, there's a lot of task-based type pricing. You do see a little bit of the hourly on the employment support, but then on immigration, the task-based pricing as they're filing those transactions. So what we did was we thought, how about we approach it as a managed program instead of competing it transaction by transaction. So we looked at our 3-year running spend history across that type of legal service, and went to the law firm that we were spending majority of our spend with, brought in a couple of other niche firms that were maybe a little bit smaller, could give them some competition, and said, what would it take to get this under a fixed fee 3-year long engagement if we can bundle all of our employment law matter spend with just you, and kind of took it that direction. And I don't know if that's along the same lines that you're thinking, where you actually have where you could treat it as like a thing or a commodity versus just an abstract hour or proposed amount of time. But that's one instance that I can think of where we actually had specific tasks that we could bundle, and then we ultimately awarded a fixed fee arrangement with the law firm that we were able to get some price consistency and transparency into, and nailed it down for X number of years. So I don't know, that's one example I could think of.
Yeah. Well, I will say, just from the data perspective, 3 areas of law have commoditized on their own: IP, employment, and immigration. Those truly have happened, but of course there is still wild profiteering in corporate work, M&A, still even litigation with hugely inconsistent rates and so on. But in those 3 practice areas you mentioned, very, like, I will say, as a growing technology company, like a Series A financing and venture finance, 50 grand. It's like a law firm's going to do that at a fee cap for that unless something's really unusual. So it is interesting, Amber, how somebody mentioned the market's dynamic. Things are changing, by the day.
So I was just going to add, Amber, it's interesting you bring up the employment area, because that's one area that we have been looking at, that it does seem to be, from one case to another, a lot of similarities in terms of the steps and actions, et cetera. So that's something that is kind of being looked at. There's probably maybe 3 predominant law firms that we use in that area, and would there be a benefit to kind of putting it all together? We've talked a lot about the fees that law firms assess, and which is extremely important. But part of the kind of the factor, the consideration also is the outcomes of these matters. I mean, that's huge in the insurance area, right? And sometimes we'll pay much more for a particular firm because of the feeling of where the outcome is going to be.
Yeah.
And you know, there's no shortage of Monday morning quarterbacks if an outcome comes out poorly and it's because you chose the wrong law firm, right? So the outcomes are huge. It's the how do these firms, once we engage them, how do they follow our guidelines? The communications are huge in terms of if there's a court proceeding that's going to be taking place and they need a response from us, are they giving us that 2-week notice that we're looking for, or is it like like John was saying earlier, where he's burning the midnight oil the night before? Well, that's certain things that come into play, and that does sometimes impact kind of who you're selecting and who's on your panel. So there's another kind of dynamic, and I know the focus here was really fees and discounts, et cetera, but there's this other huge element that's out there.
Well, Reggie, you're 100%. And coming from the legal operations, the procurement operations, and just the buy side in general, you could go out and negotiate the greatest discount, the greatest AFA in the world. But if you don't have the team and the systems in place to be able to track those and make sure that the law firms are actually submitting them the way they are, or that you can track those beautiful shadow bills that are coming through, it all just falls apart, and you might as well have not negotiated anything. So that's been a huge, aside from not having full data transparency and arms around the spend at most times, the hard pain point too, and the growing pains have always been getting the right e-billing, matter management, procurement tools in place on the back end so that our teams can manage and facilitate and support and make sure that those discounts are being properly taken, invoiced, approved, tracked. I can't tell you from a legal operations side how many conversations we had to have with their accounting teams at the law firms to say, hey, what are you guys doing? Yep. And then taking the painstaking times and months to draft up the billing guidelines so that all of our preferred firms were, submitting invoices and all taking the same discounts. So you don't end up with the wild, wild west. We have a set program. If you're going to do business with us, these are the billing guidelines you follow. This is how you submit your discounts.
Well, Amber, that gets back to
a full-time job.
It gets back to the dirty data point, and frankly, to the lack of an operating system. In a mature market, the vendor couldn't behave like that. I mean, it's pretty astounding that the buy side has to spend all that money and time to, frankly, play cop on the sell side vendor. Like, they're vendors; they should just behave according to your guidelines. And Reg, if I could, I just have to put this story. That example you gave, obviously the outcome, we call that the LeBron problem. And this may be funny coming from Bodhala, which is if you've got LeBron, LeBron gets paid like LeBron because everybody knows he's LeBron. And the guy who's the bench warmer doesn't get paid like LeBron because that's a functioning market. So the data can actually point out to your outcomes. You should maybe pay lawyers more. In fact, Kevin Velosky is getting at this. There's a rock star person in a niche. Yep. The data would support quit actually paying your mediocre people who are frankly drafting on a rock star. They're getting overpaid. Pay your LeBrons as much as you need to pay LeBron. But without data, you're not going to be able to make that judgment. And therefore, the law firm, which obviously has a vested interest, is substituting that judgment for you. And so that's one of the interesting things. And Kevin Walsh had a great comment in the chat that I thought was really cleverly phrased, where he says, hey, would the law firm give the same level of discount to a client that says gives them $1 billion or one that gives $50 a month? And that was the on that discussion of volume discounts and so on. Sylvia, how are we doing on time? Oh.
Sorry, we are almost done with our time. So I think that maybe hearing some last few statements from our experts here would be fantastic.
Absolutely. So maybe we can go John, Reg, Amber, just any closing thoughts here on an incredibly robust discussion.
Yeah. So in addition to what we've discussed and just kind of adding to it, You're only one part of the process. It's important to form a very good relationship with your legal operations partners, with the managing attorneys, and together you can develop processes to really manage a matter all the way through its life cycle, so that you don't get hit, so that discounts will be applied correctly, so that annual rate increases don't get applied to an already open existing matter, in any number of potential issues that could come up. So,
Amber, go ahead. Or Reg?
I'll just go real quick to say that data is key, and don't be afraid to share the great insights, the TCO models, all of those fantastic analysis and pivots with your attorneys, your case managers, your legal operations teams, because they get very busy in their day-to-day legal to-dos, and they sometimes forget to look at that pricing and procurement. As a procurement professional, you have so much to offer. So keep up the good fight and keep sharing, and eventually you'll land with that case handler that really wants to listen and understands. And all it takes is one good win, and you'll be rock solid and off to a good partnership.
Yeah, I'd echo exactly what Amber just said. I think of the biggest advantage that I have been able to develop over the 6 years I supported legal is building those relationships with key people that are influencers in legal, that give us the opportunity to bid something out and see what the outcome was. Yeah. And the outcome is almost always better than what they had been doing before. We're certainly far from being perfect, and there's lots of things that need to be done. We've got a tremendous amount of data between matter management and billing systems, but quite frankly, from my perspective, we don't put it all together in kind of neat, efficient ways to kind of pull the data out, and so it becomes a struggle. You can't bid everything out. I understand that, but you can certainly, to me, setting up preferred firms and bidding those things in advance. I mean, there's advantages to doing that as well, because we engage data security. So that, cybersecurity is a huge thing now with legal firms. So it's not just kind of pricing; it's risk mitigation for your company. So there's a lot of different factors to consider, and you just keep evolving, right? It's kind of a journey that we're all on.
On that amazing note, thank you very much, Reg, Amber, John, virtual. Give me a round of applause.